Hey guys, we'll get started in a few minutes. Just waiting for everybody to show up. Getting everything set up here. There we go. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Let's see here. There's the link that I've got pinned for TikTok. I've got it pinned in Facebook. I'm not going to be able to do that on YouTube because it's on my phone, so just have to bear with me there. But it's Broke to Business Boss. Easy enough to find on my website, gilbert.com. Nice to see some folks rolling in. Hello, everybody. Love the fish. Thanks. Tarpon. Light out of your way there. A little better. No. So how's everybody weathering all this cold weather that we've had? Pardon me, I'm looking back and forth. I got Facebook over here, YouTube here, and TikTok over here, so it's just the way it is. I try to keep up with all the comments best I can, but everybody's rolling in. But thanks for popping in, everybody. I do appreciate likes and shares. Yeah, it helps everybody know that we're here. And don't forget to follow me, subscribe. Depending on what channel you're on. So beautiful in central Canada. Sure, if you like white, I suppose it's probably a beautiful sheet of white, glistening with ice. I'm sure. Yeah, probably what, -30 up there. What part of Canada though? Because I mean, Canada's kind of big. I was in Canada last year. We went up to Niagara Falls for Valentine's Day and walked across the Rainbow Bridge up into Canada. It was nice. It's above zero? No way. My uncle's down in Illinois, and they're not going to see zero until the middle of the week. Wow. Good for you. Good for you. So, well, we got a few people popping in here. It's 5 after. So, the thing that I wanted to cover today. Oh, thanks for the gift. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. We like gifts. So, my hook was, the Chick-fil-A secret, 10 seconds can make millions. And I'm I'm sure most of you have noticed the difference that when you go to a Chick-fil-A restaurant, the I mean, it's totally different from any other fast food restaurant. You're in, you're out. I mean, they just move you. It's like it's just otherworldly the way that you're in and out. Nobody moves you through a drive-through like Chick-fil-A does. And because of that, um, Chick-fil-A units generate on average more than 3 times what any other restaurant, fast food restaurant does per unit. Just think about that, okay? 3 times. I mean, forget how many restaurants you have, forget, how great your food is. Because Chick-fil-A was always, I mean, they always did good, okay? But there's a difference between doing good and just blowing everybody out of the water 3 times. That's insane. So here's the thing. What I wanted to talk about today is that regardless of what kind of business venture you have, it doesn't matter if it's you're just selling stuff on Etsy or maybe you're one of my clients that's running a multi-million-dollar business, um, or $1 billion business. I have all kinds of clients. It doesn't matter. The thing is that most people, when they look at their business, they're busy. They don't have time to look at spreadsheets, and when they do, they look at the big numbers. They just look at the big numbers. They're done. That's it. Show me the bottom line. You know, like in food service, when I was a restaurant manager, they really only look at the meat, the cost of the meat. They look at the cost of the meat. They look at cost of labor. That's about all they look at. They don't really look at the cost of everything else in a restaurant. But yet, when we were told to find an extra, um, I think it was 3% in food cost, all we did was take scrapers, and whenever we emptied a can of food, we scraped it out. Instead, of course, normally you're working. You open it up, dump it out, throw it in the trash. We would scrape it out so that we got everything that was in there. Simple as that is, that got us like 3%. And you'd be like, what's 3%? Well, we were running $2 million a year. So you tell me, what's 3% of. Hang on. Just got bumped off TikTok. You guys still there? Okay. So sometimes the smallest things can be the biggest things. And, and I'm going to go through some examples. Because what Chick-fil-A did was they were looking at their numbers, having a board meeting, and it's the same normal stuff, food, cost, and labor. Well, one of the guys on the board came from a football background. And he's, the same old, drive-through sucks, And he said, well, why don't we look at this the way we look at game day film? And they looked at him like he was crazy. Like, what do you mean game day film? Like, yeah, let's throw a drone up in the air and get some footage and look at it. And they're still looking at him like he's crazy. But, they tried it. They threw a drone up in the air, filmed some footage, brought it back in there, and looked at it. And it was amazing what they uncovered. And just, it was just by looking at it from a different perspective, they were able to find simple ways to cut 10 seconds off the time that it takes to get a car through. Because it wasn't at the window, it was all the other things leading up to the window. That 10 seconds per car nets them, took them to 10 million. It netted them 10 million. So, I think that's per unit. So, it can be a big difference. But that's just one example. Okay. Let me give you another example, because we're usually looking in the wrong places. We're usually looking at the big issues, and we tend to not look at the most obvious ones. Years ago, IBM, when they were selling like copy machines and stuff before it was computers, they realized that 10% of their salespeople were moving 90% of the product. That's 10% doing 90% of the sales, which means 10% of the people were making 90% of the commissions. Okay. Not bad. Not a bad day. That also means 90% of the salespeople were sharing 10% of the commissions. That sucks. So they decided, all right, let's analyze this, break it down, let's find out what are the 10% doing that's different. And everybody thinks that when you break this down, everybody thinks that you're going to find out that the 10% are working harder than everybody else. They weren't. They were working less. So they found two things. Does anybody have any ideas what those two things were? Even one of them. Of why the 10% were selling 90% doing 90% of the sales. Any guesses? It's two things. If anybody can guess them, I'll give you a book. No guesses? I'm going to blow your mind. The two things that made all that difference. They read a book once a month, and they kept a journal. That was it. Those are the only differences. Now you think about it, okay? Because if you're reading a book, you're going to stay in this frame of mind that you're always working on yourself. You're always sharpening yourself. And by keeping a journal, you keep those good habits front of mind. You keep the things that you need to work on front of mind. You're probably going to be making goals, working off the goals. That's the difference. That's all it was. So simple, but yet nobody ever looked at it. It was right in front of their face. Now, I'm going to share, some things from my experience. I used to own a shrimp boat, and I can tell you there's little things that you do when you're shrimping that make all the difference. Because when you're out there shrimping, you've got orders to fill, and the first part of the night is, because you shrimp at night, the first part of the night is the most productive part of the night. As the night wears on, the shrimp, they tend to scatter, bury down. So it's better in the first part of the night. As the night carries on, it just drags on. So the faster you are, the sooner you're going to fill your order. Otherwise, you may be out there all night long, and it's not a fun job. It really isn't. So there's some things that you do. Number one, because your trawls are out there rolling across the bottom of the ocean floor. So you're gonna, depending on the season and how things are, you're gonna adjust those trawls so that they're catching shrimp, but they're not catching too much, moss and grass. Because the more of that comes in, the more of that you've got to work with to get out of the way to get to your shrimp. It's just wasted time. So that's something that you adjust throughout the year. But then you learn how to, you don't actually pick up the shrimp. You learn how, as your hand moves past, to just kind of, you don't even grab them. It's all, not even a pinch. You grab, like, for me, I used to grab it like the legs, and it's almost like a like this, okay, and you just like this, you know, all night long, just pitching them, okay, and you'd steer with your foot because you got to keep an eye out, see where you're going. You steer with your foot if you need to make adjustments so that you can keep going. And these little differences, learning how to pitch the shrimp, not having too much grass, make the difference between, you know, sorting out 1,000 shrimp an hour or I could usually do 3 to 4,000. I had a buddy out there, he would do 6,000 shrimp an hour. So, yeah, that's the difference. Because if you only had if you had a 4 to 6,000 shrimp order, and you could do 3 to 4,000 in an hour, you only had to shrimp a couple hours. But if you can only do 1,000 an hour, you're out there all night long. And at the tackle shop, when I go in there, because I still help out there, with the tackle and stuff, and the workers, they all like to hang out behind the counter. And any of you guys that have shops, any kind of business, you know this. The employees, no matter how good they are, they'll do their job, right? And customers come in, and they'll grab their the shrimp, the bait, whatever they're getting, and maybe a pack of hooks, whatever. And the ticket average is like $30. But they're looking around. And I'm telling you, every time, whenever I'm in there and I see somebody looking around, I'll walk over. Hey, can I help you find anything? Or I don't say, can I help you? I say, what can I help you find? Oh, I'm just looking. They always say, oh, I'm just looking. But I see what they're looking at. And so I start to talk to them about what they're looking at. And that sparks some conversation. And that $30 sale usually ends up being over $100. Sometimes $1,000. But do you think they'll get out from behind the counter and go talk to him? Not usually. Because they're not owners, so they don't care. It's just, but, I mean, that's how you decide who you're going to keep, who you're going to pay more and stuff, is the ones that you can get to come up from behind the counter. Now, the last example I'm going to give you of why it's so important to analyze what you're doing. I had a client come to me a few years back. He's in real estate, and he kept saying he wanted to meet, and we'd schedule a meeting, and then he'd cancel it. Schedule a meeting, he'd cancel it. Schedule a meeting, he'd cancel it. He canceled like 4 meetings or something. I said, dude, if you don't want to meet, just say so. I mean, you're not doing me any favors by canceling meetings. It's like, no, seriously, I want to meet because I've been stuck at 12 million for several years and I need to figure out how to get past that. But I'm just so busy, I don't have time to take any meetings. And he showed me the bottoms of his shoes. He literally had holes in the bottom of his shoes. It's like, I got money to buy shoes. I don't have time to go buy shoes. I don't have time to buy shoes. How could I have time to meet with you about marketing? And I asked him, I said, well, if you're so busy doing sales, where do the leads come from? I mean, are you short on leads? Because, oh no, I have plenty of leads. Well, then why do you need marketing? He's like, well, isn't that how you grow a business? I'm like, not necessarily. It sounds like you need help in some other areas. So we scheduled some time early in the morning before his day started. And I came in, I met with him, we talked about some things. And I ended up meeting with him one day a week for 2 months. The only really marketing thing I did was I kind of tweaked his brand image so that it was more team oriented and less personal, you know, so that people would think of the team. And after 2 months, he began to implement the changes that I showed him. The next year he did, remember, he'd been stuck at 12 million for several years. The next year he did 20 million. The year after that, 30 million. And then 50 million. But the difference was not just the money. The difference was that every time I would see him after that, he was taking the kids out on the boat, taking the kids to Disney. So I didn't just show him how to make money. I showed him how to get his life back. And this right here is the key. This is true wealth. Wealth is not just money. It's lifestyle. And if you really want to move past paying bills into a better lifestyle, then we have to take a look. It doesn't matter where you are now. If you're not happy where you are, then we have to take a look at where you are and where you want to be and analyze the differences. Because, like with Fil A, it was only a 10-second difference. You know, with the realtor, it only took 2 months. And within a couple of years, he went from 12 million to 50 million. So, oftentimes what we're looking for are the high repetition items, the high volume items. Not so much the high dollar items, not the biggest part of the spreadsheet, but the most repeatable things. So, you really want to make a change. This is what I do. Been doing this a long time. If you're happy where you are, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. But if you're not happy with where things are going, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe we should talk. Maybe I can help you. You know, I'm not here to try to sell anybody anything. I'm here to tell you that if you're not happy with where you're at, take a look at your systems, analyze them. If you need help, hey, I'm here. But that's what I brought for today. Any comments? Here's where you go fishing. Well, thanks for stopping by, everybody. Hope you stay warm and enjoy this new month we have. And let me know if you need any help with your business. I'm going to pop off.